ICE, Immigration and Customs Enforcement. Need to see identification and proof of legal status.
I'm a licensed attorney. Texas State Bar, Victoria Benjamin, my identification.
Everyone says there's something. Got documentation proving citizenship right now?
My driver's license is in my wallet.
15 years practicing law?
All the State Bar of Texas.
Fresh Mart on Lindell Avenue was packed with shoppers that morning. Saturday, 10:45 a.m. One of those Minnesota spring days where the air stayed cool but the sun promised warmth, bouncing off metal shopping carts like tiny jewels scattered across the parking lot. Victoria Benjamin swung into the lot, planning a quick shopping trip before visiting her mom's place. Weekend casual, light jacket over yoga pants, her daughter's backpack hanging from one shoulder. 8-year-old Alex was already asking what's for lunch, while 6-year-old Jaime had sneaked an apple from the grocery bag. Just a regular Saturday errand. Nothing special. Then 3 ICE agents climbed out of an unmarked SUV she hadn't spotted parked on the other side of the lot. Body cameras already activated, recording what would turn into Minnesota's most expensive parking lot encounter in history. If you're fired up to watch institutional racism get demolished, smash that like button and drop a comment telling me your location. First time here? Hit subscribe now because tomorrow's video shows cops picking the wrong target and learning a hard lesson. Let me know down in the comments if you're enjoying this. Agent Dwight Palmer took the lead walking over. His backup, Agents Kowalski and Briggs, fanned out in tactical positions like they were approaching something volatile. Victoria caught sight of them as she popped the trunk open, noticed how they spaced themselves out, hands floating near their waist equipment. The unmistakable body language of people who'd already reached their conclusion. 15 years practicing law, reading courtrooms and depositions and hostile witnesses, had trained her to assess danger in seconds. Federal agents, Immigration and Customs Enforcement badges prominent on their tactical gear, moving toward her rental vehicle like she'd already committed some crime. She recognized where this was headed before Palmer got close to her bumper. Alex stood beside the shopping cart, halfway through talking about what Grandma might make for dinner. His words stopped when he saw the men coming closer, excitement draining into worry. Jaime squeezed the apple bag against her chest, her little body pressing into Victoria's leg. Victoria continued loading her groceries. Deliberate movements, hands always visible. 15 years confronting prosecutors and unfriendly judges had also shown her that quick moves around armed officers turned dangerous fast. Palmer's voice sliced through the parking lot chatter. Flat, practiced, scripted. Afternoon. Immigration and Customs Enforcement running a compliance sweep through this zone. Show me your ID and documents proving legal status. The words came without emotion, process without thinking, power without questions. Victoria straightened up, making sure they could track her hands. The bread bag still gripped in one hand. I'm a licensed attorney. State Bar of Texas, Victoria Benjamin. My ID and bar credentials are inside my wallet in the vehicle. She motioned slowly toward the open car door, keeping every gesture obvious and controlled. Palmer stayed put, wouldn't let her move. Everyone claims they've got something. Any documentation on your person at this moment? Paperwork confirming citizenship. His tone made his disbelief crystal clear. He wasn't buying it. Victoria felt that familiar anger kindling in her chest. That quiet rage from being treated this way in a grocery store lot with her kids right there watching, dressed in weekend clothes on a Saturday morning visiting family. My driver's license sits in my wallet. My State Bar of Texas card is with it. I've practiced law for 15 years. Call the State Bar of Texas if you want verification. We'll handle verification after we establish identity and legal status. Palmer's voice turned colder now, harder. Jamie's tiny hand found Victoria's. Mama, what's happening? It's fine, sweetheart. Victoria kept watching Palmer, voice calm and level. Stay next to me. But nothing was fine. Kowalski moved around to the passenger side of the rental, peering through windows like he expected to find contraband. Briggs positioned himself by the cart, blocking any path back to the store entrance. The SUV sat behind her, cutting off retreat. She was trapped. Victoria reached slowly for her purse on the passenger seat. Palmer's hand jumped to his belt. Stop, don't reach for anything. Back away from the vehicle. I'm getting my identification. Victoria maintained her steady tone. Her training kicked into gear. Document everything. Speak clearly. Assume you're being recorded. You requested documentation. It's inside my wallet. Back away from the vehicle now. The order hung there, heavy and absolute. Around them, the parking lot kept moving through its Saturday routine. Families packing SUVs, teens laughing near the doors, the scent of fresh-baked bread and produce floating from inside. But a few shoppers were starting to notice. A woman 2 rows over with a cart pulled out her cell phone. An older man near the store entrance stopped to stare. Victoria stepped back from the vehicle, raising her hands where Palmer could see them clearly. "I'm cooperating. I'm Victoria Benjamin, Texas State Bar member, license number 73492. I'm not armed. My children are right here with me. There's no reasonable suspicion justifying this stop." She said it loud enough for the body cameras, for the phones now recording from nearby shoppers, for anyone listening. Palmer grabbed her wrist the second she cleared the car door, wrenching her arm behind her back. Kowalski closed in from the opposite side. The handcuffs felt freezing against her skin, metal digging into her wrists as they snapped shut. "Mama!" Alex's voice cracked, high and scared. Jaime started sobbing, the apple bag hitting the pavement. "It's okay, baby. Stay right where you are. Don't move." Victoria kept her voice, even while her heart pounded against her ribs. "This is unlawful seizure. I'm not resisting. I'm a Texas state attorney. This is being recorded. You're violating my Fourth Amendment rights. No reasonable suspicion exists. I'm a United States citizen, born in Houston, Texas." Palmer wasn't paying attention. He was already walking her toward the SUV, Kowalski gripping her other arm. Briggs remained by the children, his presence preventing them from following. The bystanders were fully invested now, phones recording. A store worker rushed over toward Alex and Jaime. Someone yelled something Victoria couldn't hear over the rushing in her ears. A cart rattled across the lot, forgotten. Victoria catalogued everything. The time, 10:53 a.m. No Miranda warnings given, no articulated reasonable suspicion, her credentials dismissed without verification. Palmer's badge number visible on his vest, 4791, Kowalski's 5238. The body camera's red lights blinking, the expanding crowd, her children's tears. Her mind, sharpened by years constructing cases from scattered pieces and contradictions, was already building the framework. Fourth Amendment violation, unlawful seizure without probable cause, racial profiling, infliction of emotional distress, denial of due process. Each moment another building block in a case she'd construct from memory and fury and precise legal reasoning. The SUV door swung open. Palmer guided her head down as they loaded her into the back seat. Through the window, Victoria watched the store employee kneel beside Alex and Jamie, attempting to calm them. She could see her son's face, streaked with tears and confusion, could see her daughter reaching toward the SUV, calling out for her. The door slammed. The vehicle rolled out of the lot, abandoning her children with a stranger, leaving her groceries scattered on the ground, leaving her rental parked with the trunk gaping open and doors unlocked. Inside the SUV, Palmer and Kowalski talked in hushed tones from the front seats. Casual, routine. The radio crackled with dispatch codes. The GPS screen displayed the route to the processing center 30 minutes northeast. Victoria sat quietly, wrists throbbing from the cuffs, and listened carefully. "That's 3 this week from this area," Kowalski said, his voice carrying back. "Should hit our quota for the month." Palmer grunted acknowledgement. "They're really pushing the minority areas. Easy targets for the numbers." The words landed like rocks in Victoria's stomach. She kept her expression blank, breathing controlled, but her mind sharpened to a blade's edge. Quota system targeting minority neighborhoods. Performance metrics. They were admitting it out loud. As casual as ordering coffee, completely unaware of the attorney sitting 3 feet behind them recording every word in her memory. This wasn't just about her case anymore. This was systemic, institutional, a corruption pattern hiding behind badges and bureaucratic procedures. Victoria closed her eyes and burned it into memory. Every word, every inflection, the precise language, this would become the keystone, the element that would crack the whole operation wide open. The facility appeared after 28 minutes, a squat concrete structure ringed by chain link and razor wire, institutional gray, beneath a sky that had clouded over. The spring warmth vanished, replaced by diesel fumes and hot pavement smell. They processed her in a sterile room reeking of disinfectant and nervous sweat, still handcuffed, still denied identity verification. A different agent, name tag reading Phillips, took her fingerprints with bureaucratic detachment, barely glancing at her face. Victoria answered their questions with measured precision. Name, date of birth, address. She requested her attorney, requested a phone call, requested verification of her bar membership. Each request met with identical flat responses. In process, all in due time. Standard procedure. She fired pointed questions back, legal challenges wrapped in calm delivery. Under what authority am I being held? What reasonable suspicion justified this seizure? Why wasn't my identification verified on site? Do you have a warrant? Have I been charged with anything? The agents shifted uncomfortably, exchanging glances. Phillips left the room twice, returning both times with the same non-committal answers. They were stalling, checking her story. Maybe realizing they'd grabbed someone with actual credentials instead of the easy mark they'd profiled her as. Victoria held the quota information back. Not yet. They moved her to a holding cell, 8 by 10 feet. Fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. Metal bench bolted to the concrete wall. The handcuffs finally came off, leaving angry red marks on her wrists. The door locked with a heavy, metallic click. Through the small window, Victoria could see agents moving in the corridor. Paperwork getting shuffled. The clock on the wall visible through the door's reinforced glass window. 12:17 p.m. 1 hour and 27 minutes since Palmer had grabbed her wrist. Her children were still with strangers somewhere. Her mother was probably getting a frantic call from the store employee by now. Her vehicle sat parked with the trunk open, groceries probably baking in the returning sunshine. And she was locked in a cell. Her professional credentials dismissed, her constitutional rights trampled, her family traumatized. All because 3 federal agents looked at a black woman in casual clothes and jumped to conclusions that had zero connection to evidence and everything to do with her skin color. Victoria sat on the metal bench, spine straight, mind racing through case law and precedents and filing procedures. She thought about her law school graduation, top of her class at one of Texas's most respected programs, the subtle discrimination she'd encountered there, sharpening her into something precise and relentless. She thought about the cases she'd won, the clients she'd defended, the system she'd learned to navigate and occasionally beat. She thought about Alex's terrified voice, Jaime's tears, how her daughter had reached for her through that SUV window. The fluorescent lights hummed. The clock ticked forward. 2 o'clock, then 2:30. Victoria Benjamin, Texas State Attorney, unlawfully detained mother, witness to corruption, sat in that cell and started building her case. 3 hours and 42 minutes. That's how long Victoria spent in the holding cell before they finally verified her identity and released her. 3 hours and 42 minutes of buzzing fluorescent lights and disinfectant stench and the steady clock ticking in the hallway. 3 hours and 42 minutes while her children waited with strangers, while her mother made desperate phone calls, while bystander videos spread across local news feeds. Her wrists still showed the red marks from the handcuffs when Phillips finally unlocked the cell door, his face carefully neutral. "We've confirmed your identity, Miss Benjamin. You're free to leave. No apology, no explanation, just bureaucratic acknowledgement wrapped in language designed to dodge accountability that they'd screwed up." Victoria stood, smoothing her jacket with deliberate calm. "I want copies of all body camera footage from today's incident. I want names and badge numbers for every agent involved. I want documentation of the reasonable suspicion that justified my detention." Phillips's jaw clenched. "You can file a formal request through proper channels." "I'm filing it verbally right now, on the record." Victoria kept her voice sharp but level. Attorney mode. "I also want the incident report number and your supervising officer's name." The hesitation in Phillips's expression told her everything. They understood they'd crossed lines, multiple lines, constitutional lines, the kind that destroyed careers and spawned lawsuits. She collected her belongings from the property desk, wallet, phone, keys. then walked out into late afternoon sunshine that felt blindingly bright after hours under artificial lighting. A taxi waited at the curb, arranged by her mother. The reunion at her mother's house shattered Victoria's composed exterior. Alex and Jaime ran to her the instant she walked through the door, their small bodies slamming into hers, arms wrapping tight around her waist. "Mama, mama, mama." The word repeated like a prayer, like confirmation that she was real and back and safe. Victoria dropped to her knees on the entryway floor and held them tight, felt their tears soak through her jacket, felt her own tears come hot and fast. "I'm here, babies. I'm right here. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." Her mother, Dorothy, 73 years of Texas strength and civil rights memory, stood in the doorway with her own silent tears falling. Later, after the children finally loosened their grip and went to wash their faces, Dorothy pulled Victoria into the kitchen. "They handcuffed you in front of your babies at a grocery store." Victoria nodded, unable to speak past the rage and grief stuck in her throat. "What are you planning to do?" "What I was trained to do." Victoria's voice came out steady, cold. "I'm going to dismantle them." That night, after the children finally fell asleep, Alex in her bed, Jaime curled against her side, both refusing to let her leave their sight, Victoria sat at her mother's dining table and started documenting everything. Timestamps, badge numbers, exact quotes from Palmer's initial demand and her responses, the tactical formation, the dismissal of her credentials, the handcuffs applied without cause, Alex's terrified voice, Jamie's tears, the bystander videos she'd already tracked down on social media, downloaded, backed up in 3 separate locations. And the quota system, the conversation she'd overheard in the SUV, Palmer and Kowalski's casual admission of targeting minority neighborhoods for easy numbers, performance metrics, systemic corruption hiding behind federal authority. Her distinguished legal education, years of late nights and precedent study and oral arguments against professors who doubted a black woman from Houston belonged in their program, had prepared her for this moment, had sharpened her into exactly the weapon she needed to be. Fourth Amendment violation, clear as daylight, unlawful seizure, without reasonable suspicion, without probable cause, without even minimal justification. Racial profiling, targeting based solely on appearance, direct violation of equal protection guarantees, infliction of emotional distress, the trauma to her children, witnesses to their mother's humiliation and terror. And now, with the overheard conversation, a potential pattern and practice claim, evidence of systemic corruption extending far beyond 3 agents in a parking lot, Victoria worked through the night building the skeleton of her case while her children slept fitfully beside her. 2 days later, back in Texas, she sat across from James Whitfield, a civil rights attorney whose reputation for dismantling institutional racism was legendary. His office walls displayed framed verdicts, each one marking the defeat of the kind of systemic abuse Victoria had experienced. Whitfield reviewed her documentation silently, his expression darkening with each page. When he reached the quota system notes, he looked up sharply. "You heard this directly in the vehicle, word for word." Victoria met his gaze. Palmer said, 3 this week from this area should hit our quota for the month. Kowalski replied about pushing minority areas for easy targets. Whitfield leaned back, a slow smile spreading across his face. "Miss Benjamin, they didn't just violate your rights, they handed you the key to expose an entire operation." The lawsuit filed 3 weeks later named the United States government, the Department of Homeland Security, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, and agents Palmer, Kowalski, and Briggs individually. The charges were unlawful detention, violation of Fourth Amendment rights, racial profiling, infliction of emotional distress, denial of due process. The evidence was devastating. 6 bystander videos from different angles capturing the entire parking lot incident, the store employee's witness statement describing the children's trauma, Victoria's own credentials, Texas State Bar membership, law school transcripts, 15 years of distinguished practice. Psychological evaluations of Alex and Jamie documenting anxiety, sleep disturbances, fear of uniformed authorities, trust fractured at ages 8 and 6. And buried in Victoria's deposition, waiting for the perfect strategic moment, the quota system revelation. The government's initial response came fast. $75,000, confidentiality agreement attached. Sign here, disappear quietly. Let them bury this beneath bureaucratic paperwork and sealed settlements. Victoria's response was equally fast. No. Whitfield delivered her rejection in person, in federal court, with media present. Miss Benjamin declines the settlement offer. She seeks a public trial to expose the systematic violations that led to her unlawful detention and to prevent future abuses of federal authority. The offer increased, $300,000, still with the confidentiality clause, still demanding silence. Victoria rejected it again. The government could keep their money. She wanted accountability, transparency, a public record that would stop them from doing this to someone else's children. Discovery intensified. Depositions scheduled, document requests filed. Then Victoria revealed the quota conversation in her sworn testimony, backed by the meticulous mental notes she'd recorded immediately after release. The defense team's reaction was visible even through formal legal language. Emergency motions filed, attempts to suppress, arguments about hearsay and lack of corroboration. But Victoria's credibility held firm. Distinguished attorney, no criminal record, consistent testimony, corroborated timeline. The case expanded. Whitfield filed additional discovery requests targeting ICE's internal performance metrics for that region. Email records, supervision reports, detention statistics broken down by neighborhood demographics. Patterns emerged. Minority neighborhoods targeted at rates 3 times higher than predominantly white areas despite identical legal status distributions. Detention quotas tied to agent performance reviews. Bonuses linked to numbers rather than legitimate enforcement. Victoria spent her evenings preparing testimony while balancing motherhood. Alex still woke with nightmares. Jamie asked repeatedly if the men would come back. Victoria enrolled them in therapy, sat through sessions where they drew pictures of that day, stick figures with handcuffs, crying faces, SUVs looming large on the paper. Do you think federal agents need stricter guidelines to prevent baseless immigration checks? Drop yes or no in the comments below, and share why such accountability could protect families from heartbreaking ordeals like this. Maybe even share this story to spread awareness. She also started mentoring. A young law student, Jasmine Torres, first-generation college graduate from a marginalized Houston neighborhood, reached out after reading about the case. Victoria took her under her wing, taught her how to construct arguments from evidence fragments, how to stay composed under cross-examination, how to channel rage into precision. Supporters rallied. Community activists organized courthouse vigils ahead of the trial date. Fellow attorneys offered pro bono research assistance. Local news coverage expanded into national attention. The case that had started in a grocery store parking lot was becoming a referendum on federal authority and racial profiling. The government made one final settlement offer, $1.2 million, no confidentiality requirement. Victoria considered it for exactly 3 minutes before declining. This isn't about money, this is about making sure they can't do this again. Trial preparation consumed her final weeks. Mock cross-examinations, exhibit organization, witness coordination. Whitfield prepared her for the defense's inevitable attacks that would question her memory of the quota conversation, challenge her emotional state, argue about legal technicalities, and qualified immunity. Victoria prepared differently. She reviewed her children's therapy notes, watched the bystander videos until she could recite every word she'd spoken in that parking lot, studied Fourth Amendment case law until she could cite precedents in her sleep. She drew on her Texas roots, generations of civil rights, perseverance, the memory of her grandmother who'd marched in Houston in the 1960s, the legacy of resistance against institutional prejudice. This case was bigger than her humiliation. It was about Alex and Jaime learning that injustice had consequences, that power when abused could be challenged, that their mother's credentials and dignity mattered. The night before trial, Victoria stood in her Minneapolis hotel room looking out at the city lights. Somewhere out there, Palmer and Kowalski and Briggs were preparing their own testimony. Somewhere, federal attorneys were rehearsing arguments about qualified immunity and good faith mistakes. Tomorrow she would walk into that courthouse not as the woman they dismissed in a parking lot, but as the attorney they catastrophically underestimated. Victoria turned from the window, opened her trial binder one final time, and reviewed her opening statement notes. She was ready. The Hennepin County Courthouse stood against an autumn morning sky, its stone exterior gray under clouds threatening early snow. October, in Minneapolis. 6 months since the parking lot, since the handcuffs, since her children's screams. 6 months of depositions and discovery and sleepless preparation. Victoria entered through security in professional attire. Tailored navy suit, minimal jewelry, her Texas State Bar pin visible on her lapel. Behind her, Dorothy held Alex and Jamie's hands. The children dressed carefully for a day they wouldn't fully grasp until years later. Reporters lined the corridor, cameras tracking her movement, but Victoria kept her eyes forward. The courtroom was packed. Activists in the gallery wearing shirts that read, "End Racial Profiling Now." Fellow attorneys from civil rights organizations. Media filling the press section. And at the defense table, Palmer, Kowalski, Briggs in suits instead of tactical vests, flanked by federal attorneys whose expressions carried the weight of a case they'd underestimated. Judge Andrea Thornton, a black woman whose reputation for precision was legendary, took the bench at 9 a.m. The jury, 8 women, 4 men, diverse in age and background, filed in with carefully neutral faces. Whitfield's opening statement was surgical. He presented synchronized footage from 6 angles: body cameras, bystander phones, security cameras from Freshmart. The jury watched Victoria load groceries in real time, watched the agents converge, watched her present identification that was dismissed without verification, watched her children's terror as handcuffs clicked shut, watched her voice remain steady while asserting her rights, citing constitutional protections, identifying herself over and over while being dragged away. The defense argued good faith, routine compliance check, no racial motivation, unfortunate misunderstanding quickly corrected upon proper verification. Agent Palmer testified first, his narrative polished by federal coaching. They'd received intelligence about undocumented individuals in that area, had approached Victoria based on behavioral indicators, had followed standard protocol. Whitfield destroyed him on cross-examination. What specific behavioral indicators? Palmer hesitated. General demeanor. Miss Benjamin was loading groceries with her children. Is that suspicious behavior? The jury leaned forward. In the context of our intelligence, Palmer started. What intelligence? Produce it. Whitfield's demand echoed through the courtroom. The defense couldn't. No specific intelligence, no actionable tip, nothing beyond Palmer's assertion that Victoria had looked out of place. Looked out of place? How? Whitfield pressed. Palmer's silence was damning. Victoria's testimony came on day 3. She detailed her career. 15 years of distinguished practice, law school honors, complex cases won through meticulous preparation. Described that Saturday morning, the casual family errand, the sudden confrontation, her children's fear, the handcuffs biting her wrists while she recited her credentials, her rights, her citizenship, all dismissed because 3 agents looked at her skin and made assumptions. Then she revealed the quota conversation, word for word, exactly as she'd documented, Palmer's voice saying 3 this week from this area. Kowalski's casual agreement about pushing minority areas for easy targets. The courtroom went silent. Whitfield entered her mental notes into evidence. Pages written the night of her release, time-stamped, witnessed by her mother. The defense objected frantically. Hearsay, uncorroborated. But Victoria's credibility held. Her profession, her training, her documented timeline, her lack of any motive to fabricate. The defense crumbled further when Whitfield introduced discovery documents they'd fought to suppress, internal IC emails discussing performance metrics tied to detention numbers, supervision reports praising agents for aggressive enforcement in target zones that were 85% minority neighborhoods, statistical analysis showing detention rates 3 times higher in Black and Latino areas despite identical legal status demographics. The quota system wasn't speculation. It was policy hiding behind euphemism. Expert witnesses followed. Dr. Patricia Nwosu, child psychologist, testified about Alex and Jamie's trauma. Sleep disturbances, anxiety around uniformed authorities, trust broken at developmental stages where security is foundational. She showed the jury drawings the children had made. Stick figures with handcuffs, crying faces, SUVs that dominated the page like monsters. Constitutional law expert Professor David Reeves detailed Fourth Amendment violations. No reasonable suspicion, no probable cause, detention extended hours beyond any justification. Credentials dismissed without minimal verification effort. Each element a textbook example of unlawful seizure. The defense's qualified immunity argument that agents couldn't have known their actions were unlawful collapsed under the weight of Victoria's clearly stated objections, her repeated identification, her citation of specific constitutional protections while being detained. They'd been told explicitly that they were violating her rights. They proceeded anyway. Closing arguments spanned an afternoon. The defense urged mercy, understanding the difficulty of federal enforcement in complex situations. Whitfield countered with simplicity. Victoria Benjamin presented identification. Her credentials were verifiable. She was detained anyway. Her children watched their mother handcuffed and removed because 3 agents saw a black woman and couldn't imagine she might be exactly who she said she was. The jury deliberated 5 days. Victoria spent them in controlled waiting, mornings with her children, reading to them, answering their questions about the trial with age-appropriate honesty. Afternoons reviewing notes with Whitfield, preparing for possible outcomes. Evenings with Dorothy, drawing strength from Texas roots and civil rights legacy. On the 5th day, the jury sent word. Verdict reached. The courtroom filled again. Activists, media, supporters who'd followed every moment. Victoria sat at the plaintiff's table, hands folded, breathing steady. Alex and Jaime remained with Dorothy in a separate room, shielded from whatever came next. Judge Thornton read the verdict form. On the charge of unlawful detention, guilty. On the charge of Fourth Amendment violations, guilty. On the charge of racial profiling, guilty. On the charge of infliction of emotional distress, guilty. Unanimous on all counts. The damages phase took another day. Compensatory damages for Victoria's trauma, for her children's psychological harm, for violations of constitutional rights. Punitive damages against the individual agents and the government agency that had fostered a quota system prioritizing numbers over legality. The final award, $15.4 million. The courtroom erupted. Applause from the gallery despite Thornton's gavel. Activists shouting victory. Media rushing for statements. At the defense table, Palmer stared at the floor. Kowalski's face had gone gray. Briggs sat motionless. Victoria remained still, her expression composed, but her eyes reflected something deeper. Vindication measured not in money, but in accountability. In a public record that couldn't be sealed or buried. In precedent that would protect others. Outside the courthouse, she made a brief statement to assembled press. This was never about compensation. It was about ensuring that what happened to my children and me doesn't happen to another family. It was about exposing corruption that treats human beings as quotas and credentials as irrelevant because of skin color. I hope this verdict sends a message that such behavior has consequences. The consequences rippled outward. Palmer, Kowalski, and Briggs were suspended pending internal investigation. The ICE regional office announced policy reviews and mandatory bias training. Federal oversight committees launched inquiries into quota systems across multiple jurisdictions. The case became cited precedent in civil rights litigation nationwide. Victoria returned to Texas with her children and her mother, the verdict behind them, but the work ahead. She used part of the award to open Benjamin and Associates, a law firm specializing in civil rights violations, racial profiling, unlawful detention cases. Pro bono work prioritized, victims who couldn't afford representation given the same meticulous preparation she'd received. She hired staff carefully. Young attorneys from marginalized backgrounds who understood systemic abuse from personal experience, paralegals who'd faced discrimination, investigators who knew which neighborhoods were targeted and why. The firm became a beacon. Families traveled from across Texas and beyond, bringing stories of traffic stops that escalated without cause, detentions based on appearance, credentials dismissed, rights violated. Victoria took each case personally, building arguments from evidence fragments, teaching her staff to channel rage into precision. She also mentored. Jasmine Torres joined the firm after passing the bar, her first case supervised directly by Victoria. Other law students followed. First-generation graduates, immigrants, survivors of the same systems they now fought against, Victoria taught them what her own experience had proven. Underestimated power is the most dangerous kind. Overlooked brilliance is the sharpest weapon. Alex and Jaime grew up watching their mother's purpose. Therapy continued, the nightmares fading gradually, replaced by understanding. By age 10 and 8, they could articulate what had happened to them: unlawful detention, racial profiling, systemic injustice. Could explain why their mother worked late preparing cases, could see justice not as something granted but as something claimed through evidence and persistence. The firm funded youth programs, scholarships for students from targeted neighborhoods, community workshops on constitutional rights, know your rights materials distributed in multiple languages. The trauma Victoria had endured became the foundation for preventing others' trauma. Years accumulated. The firm won case after case, each verdict another brick in accountability's wall. Victoria spoke at law schools, her story a case study in turning violation into vindication. She returned to her alma mater in Texas, the distinguished program where she'd faced subtle discrimination, and lectured to new students about resilience, strategy, the long game of dismantling bias. The Freshmart parking lot, meanwhile, installed a small bronze plaque near the entrance. Witness injustice, document truth, demand accountability. Below it, a QR code linking to resources on civil rights and legal aid. Shoppers passed it daily, most without noticing, but some stopped to read, to remember, to understand that ordinary moments could become extraordinary reckonings. Victoria drove past similar scenes often: grocery stores, parking lots, everyday spaces where families move through routine errands. She thought about that Saturday morning 6 years ago, 7 years ago, eventually a decade ago. Thought about the woman she'd been then. Distinguished attorney already but underestimated, dismissed, humiliated. And the woman she'd become, still distinguished but no longer overlooked. A force that had dismantled institutional corruption, established precedent, built a legacy of accountability that rippled outward with every case, every verdict, every family she helped. She thought about Alex and Jaime, teenagers now, watching her work with pride instead of fear. Learning that power abuse could be challenged, that credentials mattered, that their mother's dignity once violated had been reclaimed through method and evidence and unyielding persistence. Victoria pulled into her own driveway one evening, groceries in the trunk, ordinary Saturday errands complete without incident. Inside, her children helped unload bags while discussing their week. Dorothy visited for dinner, her Texas strength and civil rights memory, a foundation that had held through everything. Later, Victoria returned to her home office, reviewed case files for Monday's hearing, mentored a young attorney via video call. The work continued. It would always continue because systems didn't dismantle themselves, because bias didn't fade without confrontation, because the line between acceptable and unacceptable had to be drawn, reinforced, defended. Victoria Benjamin had drawn that line in a Minneapolis parking lot, with her children watching, had reinforced it through $15.4 million in damages, had defended it through a firm that turned victims into advocates and trauma into transformation. The grocery store confrontation had cost 3 agents their careers and the government millions, but the real cost, the permanent cost, was the message sent to every federal agency, every officer, every system that assumed credentials didn't matter when skin color did. They'd underestimated the wrong woman. They'd traumatized her children. They'd handed her evidence of their own corruption, and she'd made sure the entire country knew the consequences. The fluorescent lights of her office hummed softly. Outside, Texas nights settled over quiet streets. Victoria closed her case file, turned off her desk lamp, and went to join her family. Tomorrow, another case. Another family seeking justice. Another opportunity to ensure that what happened to her became harder, rarer, costlier for those who would repeat it. The work was never finished, but the line held firm, and that was enough. If you enjoyed this video, Make sure to smash that like button, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss the next story. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it, and let's keep growing this community together. Before you go, drop a comment below. I'd love to hear your thoughts on what resonated with you most. Until next time, stay safe, stay curious, and I'll catch you in the next one.